What's up, everybody? This is Brian.
And I'm Logan. And this is Tops.
Yep.
And this is Bottoms. Yep.
Close.
And we're Crush Cards. Hi team, how you doing? Happy Thursday, here we are. So for those of you who don't know, a couple months ago, I did the World Legacy lore along with the mythology. Those will be linked at the end of the video in the end screen. And those were a really big hit, which was really cool. And I totally wasn't expecting that. So I guess this is becoming a series now. We're calling it Lore with Logan. For those of you who don't know, we are a relatively new channel. We just started a couple months ago, and this is all super new to us, so we're doing what we can, and we hope you're happy to be here. I wanted to cover the Buster Blader lore next because it was a really popular request, and for the last couple weeks, we have been covering legacy deck profiles like Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, Red Eyes, and on Monday, we will be doing a Buster Blader deck profile. So I thought it was only fitting that Buster Blader was next, and a lot of you guys requested it because it's sad, it's tragic, it's kind of happy at the end. I don't know, I guess it's up to you to decide. It's a little bit of both. And it just got new support in Dual Overload, which I think makes the ending a little happier. It's like sad and happy, it's sappy. But with that being said, we're just gonna get right into it today. But before we do that, I do wanna ask if you guys would love to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. It'd be really cool. It would help you guys be a part of this community and see me put out more cool stuff in the future. And also check out our Instagram, which is at crushcardsYGO. It's in the description box down below, and a Discord and a Patreon if you wanna further support the channel in any of those realms. It would be really fun, and we love interacting with you guys. So with that being said, let's get right into the Buster Blader lore. It's not very long, but it's a good time. And if you guys didn't notice, if you're listening, we also made a new song just for this lore video. Brian worked his butt off on a brand new song. It's really cool. If you can name this song, that'd be really neat. But I wanted to give it a more relaxed feel for this storytelling time that we're going to be in together. So cuddle up, grab some coffee or some cocoa or whatever it is you want right now. Hang out with me, and we're gonna go on a little journey of good old Buster Blader and his adventures. So let's get into it, team. So typically, people start the story off with just going with the hero, being like, here's our hero, here he is, it's Buster Blader. But I would like to talk about first is how Buster Blader came to be Buster Blader. We don't have a whole lot of actual real backstory on how he became this dragon-killing guy with a reputation, but I would like to kind of try and touch on and build a backstory for him since we don't have much of a solid one. And it's always weird to just have a story with this guy who's already established, right? Like, oh, we know he's this warrior who kills dragons and he's really well known, but why? And like, how? How did he get here? So here's what I think happened. So weirdly enough, we're starting at the magical Citadel of Endymion. I know, this isn't a pendulum deck and this isn't a pendulum monster, but weirdly enough, this is where things begin. I like to think that all of these really big legacy characters kind of started off in an area together. So the Citadel of Endymion, as you know, is predominantly for spellcasters. And we all know that the main man who runs the magical Citadel of Endymion is Endymion, the mighty master of magic. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, what does any of this have to do with Buster Blader? So, coming into our story, we're going to start here. We're going to say this is kind of like our school. This is like our mythical institution, ha ha ha, pun intended. And then we have Endymion, who's kind of like our head honcho, who kind of sees over everything that's happening. Now, these are some old cards I'm about to bust out. But we have the Skilled White and the Skilled Dark Magician. Now, at face value, these two might seem like they have nothing to do with Buster Blader, but if you actually read Skilled White Magician, each time a spell card is activated, place one spell counter on this card when that spell card resolves. You can tribute this card with 3 spell counters on it and special summon a Buster Blader from your hand, deck, or graveyard. And the same goes for the Skilled Dark Magician, except it special summons a Dark Magician. Obviously, it says Skilled Dark Magician. Now, what's so relevant about these cards is I think it's really interesting that both of these kind of special summon a Buster Blader or a Dark Magician from a respective area, whether it's the hand, deck, or a graveyard. So think of these as our Dark Magician and our Buster Blader in training at the magical Citadel of Endymion under the training of Endymion. Endymion, again, is our kind of overseer who sees all of these potential heroes and builds them into the heroes that they can be one day. So for the Skilled White Magician, Skilled Dark Magician, it's interesting that they add counters, and then when they remove the counters, they summon their respective Buster Blader or Dark Magician, and we could consider these as sort of lessons. So lessons 1, 2, and 3, and you don't actually get your power up into Buster Blader or Dark Magician until you have those counters or those lessons, and then you can use them in order to kind of rank up and become more powerful. I also think it's worth noting that the Skilled White Magician has the same like blue counter sort of gems as the Buster Blader, so I think that's an interesting correlation along with the yellow sort of plating So that's just a cool little thing to notice. So again, we see these as pupils under Endymion at the Magical Citadel. This is kind of like the origin place for all of these main characters to kind of grow and become the heroes that we know them to be. So while this isn't necessarily official, this is kind of what I have pieced together to kind of give some backstory by using cards that we already have to kind of explain the history of how these heroes become heroes. So after their training and after their counters are removed, we get their rank ups into their respective heroes, which are Buster Blader and Dark Magician. At the Citadel, where they train, where you get the choice to decide what you'd like to major in or become a master in, I suppose. And so the skilled Dark Magician chose to become a wizard or a spellcaster and follow through with that spell casting ability, whereas the skilled White Magician chose to become a warrior, which is the more offensive, as spellcasters are more defensive. And so you kind of get to pick your route. So I like to think that Buster Blader made that choice to become a warrior. So they each chose the respective major or mastery. And I also find it interesting that they are both level 7s. Now this is just me probably grasping for straws, but I find it interesting that they're both level 7s and that their original common selves were level 4s, and after 3 counters you remove and they become their masters, which are 7. So 4, 3, 7. I thought that was kind of interesting. So like you have the 3 lessons and then you become your level 7. Isn't that neat? Isn't that kind of cool? So we have the Dark Magician and Buster Blader. We have our defense, we have our offense. They have pretty respectively similar stats, which is also interesting. But so that is how I kind of see Buster Blader coming to be and how everyone is kind of interconnected somehow. Because even if you are a warrior, there is some magic that has to go into it. You're not just a warrior. He clearly has powers that are respective to dragon types themselves. There's always some sort of magic involved in all of this. After leaving the Citadel, these two sort of go off and set off on their own journey to enhance their powers and show off what they've learned and basically just build their own strength. And in doing so, being that the Buster Blader is a dragon slayer and Dark Magician is a spellcasting wizard, it would seem that at some point they would have to work together in order to defeat a common enemy. And so in this sense, one of the most common enemies that we could face in the Yu-Gi-Oh world are dragons. Dragons. And even though he is Buster Blader, there's only so much that one man can do. And being that the Dark Magician kind of grew up and grew with him, it only makes sense that he would need his help at some point. And against a dragon, the two of them would eventually fuse together and create the Dark Paladin, which is a combination of both of their crafts, in the sense that during either player's turn, when a spell card is activated, you can discard a card, negate the activation, and destroy it. And this card gains 500 attack for each dragon type monster on the field or in either player's graveyard. So it's a combination of both the Dark Magician's spell casting abilities and Buster Blader's warrior type abilities. And in doing this and having this fusion, they're able to take on more monsters, more dragons, and enhance their own powers and abilities together. And then once the dragons are defeated, they can defuse and go their separate ways. I like to think that Dark Magician and Buster Blader have this connection that is kind of like distant friends who are on their own journeys but still have a connection, whether it's through actual battle or through growth as people. There's this shared kinship and shared origin between them as both level 7s, as past wizards and future warriors in their own right. So time passes and we see that he develops into Buster Blader, the Destruction Swordmaster. He becomes the Destruction Swordmaster in the sense that everything that he destroys or everything that he kills, he adds on to himself and equips to himself and his armor. And that's seen in the sense that his card effect reads, if a monster your opponent controls is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can target one of those destroyed monsters and equip it to this card. So he takes what he destroys and he puts it onto himself and attaches it as his own armor or a piece of him to build himself up and make himself more powerful. So he's kind of like a pro blacksmith in his own right that he has become over time. And his second effect reads, once per turn you can send one monster card you control that is equipped to this card to the graveyard. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls with the same type as that monster sent to grave. That'll become a little more relevant in a little bit, so keep that in mind as we go. But basically, to take away from this is that Buster Blader has become a Destruction Swordmaster. He has a reputation. He uses whatever he kills he uses whatever he destroys as a part of his new armor or his craft. So you can see on his sword, he has like the teeth of dragons. He's got like some scales and claw stuff on him. He's basically just using that to make himself more powerful. But so this is where the main part of our story begins, the prologue of the Destruction Swordsman. Now the prologue in this sense means the beginning or right before, and we have the Buster Blader Destruction Swordsman fighting this Buster Dragon, which is just big and evil and not very friendly looking. He's clearly slaying it, and it seems that his motivation for killing and destroying all of these dragons is that they're corrupted in his mind and that they aren't good. They are seen as evil creatures. They are seen as things that terrorize others and need to be taken out. But we also see in this card that the Buster Blader Destruction Swordsman is holding what looks like a small little baby dragon. And why on earth would he be holding a baby dragon? Why would he be saving it? And why is he taking it away from this Buster Dragon in particular? There are a lot of things that are interpreted from this card. And personally, I think that this baby dragon was a helpless one and that the presumed mother was kind of chaotic and was either at a point of mental corruption where it wasn't going to protect its child, where it was willing to kill its child, or the baby was in a place of danger to the point where it didn't matter if the mother wanted it to be safe or not. And Buster Blader saw that and figured instead of letting it be killed in all the chaos accidentally, he would just go against his own morals and take the baby with him and keep it safe. Now this is very out of character for Buster Blader because we know he is the Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer, Destruction Swordsman guy. He's the dude who's known for killing dragons. He's not known for saving them and befriending them and becoming a little parent. But it seems like in this sense, he had a soft moment where he realized that the value of a young life was not worth destroying over the destruction of another evil and corrupt dragon. So it was kind of a life for a life in the sense that I feel like he saw it as.
Yeah, cool. But look at the puppy.
And this brings us to our Buster Whelp of the Destruction Swordsman. This is our sweet little whelp. He's in his little bed that Buster Blader has clearly made for him. It looks very cozy and comforting. He's just a baby. He's just a small dragon. He clearly is not evil as the other Buster Dragon was. He's clearly light. He has a light attribute. He's a level 1 because he's just an itty bitty baby. And he is interestingly enough a tuner. And I think that is something worth noting because we see that this Buster Dragon was clearly evil. Buster Blader clearly thinks that dragons are evil and worth slaying, but he chooses to keep this one and sort of raise it for good and raise it for his own agenda and his own benefits, whether he realizes that intentionally or not. It's interesting that it's a tuner because it's sort of on this duality of good and evil. It is supposedly an evil creature, but it is being trained to do good, and that might cause some conflict in the future with the Buster Whelp because it is trying to tune one way despite its natural instinct to be another way. So that kind of conflict is really going to become interesting as the story develops. You can tribute this card and special summon a Buster Blader from your hand or graveyard, and then if this card is in your graveyard and you control a Buster Blader, you can discard a Destruction Sword card and special summon this card. So again, it comes into they both play into each other. They both need one another, so you can use one to get the other and so on and so forth. They're like a tag team at this point. And so time passes, and together the Buster Whelp and Buster Blader Destruction Swordsman work together in order to defeat common enemies who pose a threat to humanity, themselves, and everybody for that matter. And so we know that Buster Blader is a blacksmith himself and that he crafts his weapons and armors himself with the things he destroys. And we can also see this as it applies to Buster Whelp himself. Over time, he starts to actually change as they work together. So we have first, he maintains this level 1 tuner attribute to him. He's still a tuner, he is still a level 1, and as Dragon Buster Destruction Sword, he still has Buster Blader's sword that he has in this picture. It has the claw, it has the blue beading, and he's sort of like the assistant to Buster Blader. He is equipping him with his swords, which is kind of interesting because you equip the Destruction Swords to Buster Blader. So the card effect has a direct relation to the actual relationship that they have with one another. And for those of you who are involved with the current meta, everyone hates this card because you can equip it to a card and it locks you out of your extra deck. So each of these equipped cards have a different effect. One is the extra deck, one is a graveyard lockout or an abyss dweller, and the other locks you out of spells and traps. So there's a lot to take in with these 3 cards that I'd like to talk about. Again, I said that he is still a tuner and a level 1 in this one, which shows that he's still kind of on this sway of am I a good little dragon? Do I love what I do? Am I having fun? Or am I starting to kind of feel corrupted because I am being not forced, but I'm being influenced and groomed to kill my own kind by being a dragon buster instead of a buster dragon, which is what I actually am. And we see these sort of auras start to build around the buster whelp. Having a buster whelp actually start to witness destroying and be an accomplice in the destruction of his own kind would kind of start to have a negative impact on him, which is very interesting to note because he becomes a dark from here on out. He is no longer the pure light little baby dragon that we met. He kind of starts to shift into this darker entity. And so when we get to Wizard Buster Destruction Sword, we see that he is growing. He does grow over this time, and that in this one he has two swords. He has dual swords and they have spell counters in them, which makes sense because this is the Wizard Buster or the Spellcaster Destroyer card. We can see that the Buster Whelp is starting to just appear a little darker, not significantly from Dragon Buster, but he is starting to look a little different. He's starting to look a little more feisty. He's not really like, hey, I'm just here hanging out. He's kind of like, like he's got some sort of agenda to him now. It's also interesting to note that just like in the beginning with Dark Magician and Buster Blader, Buster Whelp actually levels up 3 different times before reaching his final form. We get the Dragon Buster, the Wizard Buster, and the Robot Buster, all of them progressing his power at different levels and reaching different heights of strength.
Puppy.
And then we get to the Robot Buster Destruction Sword, where we definitely see a change in the Buster Whelp. This is where it is the most prominent. He is significantly darker. Like, let's just take a look from the first Dragon Buster to here. His tail is almost completely blacked out. He looks a lot more sinister than before, and the overall card art is just significantly darker. Like, his eyes just seem a little more vicious. There's just something not quite right about our little whelpy boy. I'd also like to point out the attack and defense of these 3 cards. So we have a level 1, a level 3, and a level 4 for each of the equips. There are 400 and 300 attack and defense for Dragon Buster, 1200 and 900 for Wizard Buster, and 16 and 12 for Robot Buster. As these level up, they multiply by the level respectively. So 400 times 3 is 1200, which is the level 3. 400 times 4 is 1600, which is the level 4. 300 times 3 to the level 3 is 9. 300 times 4 is 12 to the level 4. So this is also literally leveling up our Buster Whelp as he kind of grows into this darker entity. He is literally becoming more powerful, becoming darker, and he is no longer a tuner, which is interesting. He's no longer on that split end of, oh, I could shift this way or I could shift this way. He has become dark. Something is not quite right within him. And it may be that Buster Blader may not have noticed this at first because, of course, they were successful. They were defeating all of these monsters. They were building this amazing reputation. They were basically the dream team. They were tagging out together. They were able to equip for the necessary reason to defeat a common enemy, and they were successful. And while the Buster Whelp seemed like it was appearing darker, the Buster Blader may not have noticed this because it was doing its purpose. It was fulfilling its job, and it wasn't doing anything against Buster Blader itself. They were partners after all, and even if the Buster Whelp was becoming darker, they had a strong kinship and a relationship that they built over time. So while this is happening, the Buster Whelp still relies on Buster Blader, and Buster Blader relies on it as well. And I'd like to bring us back to this card really quick, the prologue, because the last clause of it is actually relevant to the equips. Now, the end of the prologue says, you can banish this card from your graveyard. In this turn, Destruction Sword cards you control cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. So in coming back to this, Buster Blader is putting in an effect that protects the whelps. Because the Buster Blader does in fact control the Buster Whelp at this point, it is protecting these cards from any harm, which is in that sense the Buster Dragon or anything that comes in harm's way of his whelp. So even then, he is providing a protection or a barrier that keeps it from becoming harmed, showing that he does in fact care about the Buster Whelp. So we see that Buster Blader and the Buster Whelp have become kind of a dream team in their own right. They're extremely powerful. They can take on virtually any archetype, any type of monster, and tag team in order to defeat them through different types of locks. And while that's all well and good, Buster Blader does eventually notice that something isn't quite right, and the Buster Whelp is growing. The Buster Whelp isn't always going to remain a baby, and it seems that Buster Blader is kind of in denial of that reality by continuing to feed into this sort of darkness that the Buster Whelp is facing as they face all of these different monsters. He is still having him craft these weapons and equip these weapons to him and basically create the Buster Whelp into this sort of killing machine and his accomplice, which wouldn't be healthy on anyone or anything. And having that instilled on a small baby dragon at a young age is not going to prove for very beneficial results. While it might be great in the short term to have a partner and to have someone to care for and work with, it's not healthy. And seeing what the Buster Whelp is actually going to be at its peak age, which is Buster Dragon, did not seem to stir Buster Blader from thinking about his actions before instilling all of that agenda of his own onto the Buster Whelp. And eventually the Buster Whelp does become exactly what it was born into being, which is Buster Dragon. While one could think that Buster Blader didn't want this to happen to Buster Whelp originally and that he wanted it to be good and fight for good, that didn't change the fact that all of that killing and all of that darkness still impacted the Buster Whelp to the point where it still became exactly what it was born into being, which is the Buster Dragon that is extremely similar to the one that Buster Blader originally fought when he caught Buster Whelp and protected him in the first place. And so at one point, Buster Blader has to witness the Buster Whelp become this large dark being of the Buster Dragon. But it's not purely evil. The dragon itself still cares about Buster Blader. The dragon itself is still connected to Buster Blader. It's not just some mindless killing machine that grows up one day after all this darkness and wants to kill everything in its path. It actually is still very much reliant on Buster Blader and is almost obsessively caring for it, which can be seen in its effect. All monsters your opponent controls become dragon type. Once per turn, if you do not control a Buster Blader monster, you can target a Buster Blader in your graveyard and special summon it. Once per turn during your opponent's turn, you can target one Buster Blader monster you control, equip it with one Destruction Sword monster in your graveyard. Quick effect. That's crazy. So not only is this Buster Dragon still caring for Buster Blader, but it is entirely has an effect that is meant to help Buster Blader. It makes everything a dragon type. It special summons a Buster Blader from the graveyard, and it has a quick effect that allows you to equip any of the Dragon Busters to Buster Blader. So you can pick your respective lock that you would like to go into and quick effect equip it to your Buster Blader. That's crazy. It's not like the Whelp becomes Buster Dragon and says, "Rah, I'm gonna kill you, Buster Blader." No, he's actually like, "Hey, I'm Buster Dragon. I'm big and scary, but you know what? I still really care about you. So here, why don't you just equip me and everything's a dragon now and you can do whatever you want." It's kind of sad how even in the state of darkness and sort of chaos that Buster Dragon is in, that he's still doing everything to fulfill his job that he's been trying to do since day one for Buster Blader. Isn't that sad? Poor guy. He's kind of in this point where he literally just doesn't seem to know what to do. He's kind of fighting his origins. He's fighting his instincts. He's meant to be this big evil dragon that's supposed to just kill everything in sight, but he's actually still fighting that and having that internal struggle to protect and serve his master or his partner, or dare I say, his father. And that struggle quite literally brings us to karma of the Destruction Swordsman and the karma that Buster Blader faces for these choices and his actions. This is kind of like the karma that happens when your parents sort of project all of their own wishes and all of their own desires onto their children, and then their children end up rebelling in some sense, or their children end up just as bad as their parents didn't intend them to be. And Buster Blader sees this and realizes this when the thing that he loved and cared for and nurtured became this dark entity of destruction, all because he tried to make a partner out of it and trained it in this sort of brutal atmosphere of killing and slaying, and not only killing his own kind, but killing other kinds of people and beings, which can't be healthy on anything, as I said before. And so now Buster Blader must make a decision as to whether or not he will fight his Buster Whelp or if he will just let it take him out. But unfortunately, having a reputation and valuing his own life, he's not just going to let the Buster Whelp actually destroy him, even if it is a Buster Dragon at this point. But you can see in the actual card art that he is literally on his knees, and it seems like he's pleading with Buster Dragon, sort of trying to tell it to not continue its warpath that it's on right now. And you can see he has a hand outstretched as if he's telling it to stop, as if he's trying to still have some semblance of control over it. But unfortunately, that control is virtually gone because the Buster Dragon is no longer obedient to him, even though it's still is obsessively caring for him. It's kind of just driving on this instinctive autopilot, which is really sad. And Buster Blader sees this and he's kind of just breaking down in front of it because he doesn't want to have to make any harsh decisions or have to do something he doesn't want to do. And again, this is just him seeing the consequences of his actions and truly seeing that all of this stuff that he thought was good and thought was healthy and thought was okay because, hey, we're partners on this journey, was actually not at all okay and was actually corrupting this poor whelp from the start because he was trying to change it into something that it wasn't. He was trying to make it into a sort of killing machine against its own kind when really it was just a dragon that didn't need to fight its own nature. But here it is actually doing that, and now it's causing a whole different slew of problems. And that brings us to Destruction Swordsman Fusion. Buster Blader has to take responsibility for the actions that he's committed and the influence that he's had over this poor Buster Whelp over all of this time. And I don't think he actually kills the Buster Dragon in this sense. I think he does just knock it out at this point. I don't think he actually kills it and slays it, though he does do enough to actually put it into a point of non-consciousness. And we can see here that his goal is not to continue on with his reputation and use the Buster Dragon just to create more swords or craft his own power, but it seems like he cares about this whelp and enough to want to save it, whether it's physically save it or save it in a spiritual sense. And so here, I just like take a look at the art really quick. We have Buster Blader who is putting his hand on this sort of, it looks like he's purified, like he's all white now. He is not the dark Buster Dragon that we just saw earlier. He is purified, he's whited out. He looks like a much larger version of his actual whelp self. His eyes are closed and we see that Buster Blader is sort of feeding into this like life force or this essence and actually purifying the dragon itself so that it is no longer filled with rage. And I think this all just wraps back around to the magical and spellcaster essence that Buster Blader still has within him from the Citadel and his pupil training. And this card itself says fusion summon a fusion monster that lists Buster Blader as material from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or either side of the field for fusion materials. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send one card from your hand to the grave, add this card to your hand. So through this card, they are fusing together to create something that is not merely for the benefit of Buster Blader, that is for the actual benefit of the both of them, because he does care about the Buster Whelp and the Buster Dragon, and he's not just going to kill it selfishly. He has at least realized the fact that even though this is a dragon, he does not need to kill it and he does not need his own selfish power because this is something he cares about and something he cared for. And that brings us to Destruction Sword Memories, where we see the sword has been cast down quite aggressively into the ground, and I think this was done on purpose to show that he's not killing the Buster Dragon. He will not actually do it. We do not see the sword go into the Buster Dragon. We do not see any sort of malice or violence used against it. And while he is purifying it in this one, we see in this card art that we see the reflection of, again, the memories in the sword's blade. We see a young Buster Whelp and we see Buster Blader kind of having their little like bonding experience and just showing that closeness to us as the viewers. And we see the rain pouring down. It's all really symbolic in a way. You could read the rain as sort of the tears of Buster Blader or the tears of Buster Dragon or the whelp. You could see this as just a sort of tearful representation, or you could see it as a symbol of renew or rebirth, which is a common symbol for rain as well. This is not only shedding tears for the past and what has been done and the bad deeds that Buster Blader has committed on Buster Whelp, but also as a chance for rejuvenation and rebirth by cleansing him and the whelp of all of this darkness that they've both shared with one another. It's not just Buster Blader being dark, or it's not just Buster Whelp being dark. They have both experienced darkness and they are both being cleansed of this darkness. And so how are they being cleansed of this darkness, you ask? Well, both of these cards involve a fusion of a Buster Blader fusion monster. And so the two fuse together into Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, and in this way they get to sort of live in unity together and forever instead of having to lose the Buster Whelp as the Buster Dragon. He ends up being able to fuse with it, and we can see a lot of the Buster Whelp's resemblance in this fusion. We see the Buster Whelp's wings in the background, which you'll see better in another card art. You see the white and gold plating that resembles the Buster Whelp, and while it's still interesting that Buster Blader is still the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman using the Buster Whelp's sort of soul and essence, it still gets to work with Buster Blader and serve its master or its father figure without being seen as a dragon or a monster, because now they are fused as one. He is now purified. He is now fighting with Buster Blader as this sort of ultimate master of dragon destruction. And then we come to Destruction Sword Flash, where we see that it's no longer targeting particular types in this effect. It says if you control a fusion monster that lists Buster Blader as material, banish all monsters your opponent controls. So it's no longer choosing the type that it is destroying. It is just blanket getting rid of everything. And when a card or effect is activated that targets a Buster Blader monster you control, except during damage, you can banish this card from your graveyard, negate the effect, and destroy the card. So again, it's just driving home that they are sort of this ultimate creature that have bound together in order to destroy anything that sort of gets in its path. And we can see the wings of actual Buster Dragon or the Buster Whelp a lot better here, and just how he has really taken on the actual appearance of the Buster Whelp, and he's kind of living on its spirit through this appearance and through this fusion. And then lastly, it's just really interesting to note that Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, is now a light attribute. The Buster Blader has always been an earth attribute for every single form that he has taken, but when he fuses with the Whelp, which was originally a light, he purifies it back into its light original format. So when they do fuse, he becomes a light attribute, which I find really neat. So even though the Buster Dragon itself was a dark, when he purified it, it became a light like its original attribute. And now we have the Buster Blader Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, who is a light. I just think that's really neat and a really cool little thing that they did there. And that brings us to our last card, the Protector Whelp of Destruction Swordsman. It is the new Link 2 that came out in Dual Overload, and I think it's a really, really, really sweet and sad card, because we see that the Whelp is still there in spirit for Buster Blader, even after everything they've gone through, after all of the struggle between its instinct and its nature, and wanting to protect Buster Blader up until the very end and serve him in every way, even though its own natural instinct was to become this chaotic Buster Dragon instead of a Dragon Buster. He's still, in the very end, even in spirit, is hanging out on Buster Blader's shoulder, which is the Buster Blader Dragon Destroyer Swordsman, because you can see the gold plating and the white armor that he is wearing. For those of you who might have not been sure, it is definitely the fusion that he is sitting on, which only furthers the fact that they are serving as one entity at this point, and that they are working together in tandem. And I think it's really nice that he's also back to his light attribute that he was in the beginning. So now they are both lights. They are not an earth and a dark. They are both light attributes who are working as one. And I also want to point out how cool the effect is of this card as well. It says, if this card is link summoned, you can send a Destruction Sword card from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can special summon a Buster Blader monster from your hand. I think that's really rad, because it just shows how sending a Dragon Buster Destruction Sword card to the grave is showing how it would sacrifice itself to this day in order to special summon or bring out a Buster Blader. He is still working to serve him, even if it means sacrificing himself. And then he has a second effect where at the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls no monsters, you can target a Buster Blader monster you control that did not declare an attack this turn and inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack. So even though it's really sad that Buster Whelp ended up sort of perishing in the end, he still ended up living on through Buster Blader by working together with him as this one powerful entity. So the moral of the story is basically everyone should be a little more considerate to what everyone else wants, and not just push our own needs and wants onto other people and other things, because it's not fair. And at the end of the day, we should all have the choice of what we want to be and who we want to become. But that's it for the lore, guys. I think it's really cool that the Buster Blader deck got support with Dual Overload, and it got that Link monster. It'll be really cool in the Buster Blader deck that I have coming out on Monday. It'll be a lot of fun, but I hope you guys enjoyed this lore. I know it's kind of sad, but I'm really glad it sort of wrapped up at the end for the better and was a little happier than what we've all known for the last couple years for the lore. It kind of put a nice little touch on the end to kind of soften the wound for a lot of us. And let me know what you guys thought of the beginning. It was kind of open to interpretation with the Dark Magician and Dark Paladin sort of lore amidst all of this, but I really wanted to include it because it seemed like a missing piece that a lot of people noticed, and I wanted to at least try and give my insight on what that could have looked like. So thank you guys so much much for hanging out with me for this lore. I hope you had a blast. I hope it was at least relaxing to listen to, and I hope it wasn't too depressing of a journey. I think it all turned around in the end. So again, if you enjoyed this and you had a good time, please consider subscribing to the channel. We are new and we are growing, and it would be really rad to have you be a part of this and see more lore and whatever else we put out in the future.
Thank you guys so much for sticking around for this. We know that the game is very, very fun, but we do like to delve into the actual stories behind the cards and where they actually stem from. So we hope you guys enjoyed this, and we will see you on Monday for our actual Buster Blader profile.
And if there's anything you'd like to add or anything you picked up on in the lore that I did not mention, feel free to drop it in the comments and let me know. I do read all of them. So I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me. You matter, you're great, and I hope you guys have an awesome, awesome weekend. Thanks, guys.